positive for COVID-19 can create and how best to deal with it. Chris, good evening tonight. And I mean, I'm not sure if you were able to hear from this previous clip that we've played of a viewer that got her home fogged after testing positive for COVID-19. Her question there to the person that is cleaning is, will I get it again? Will this work? You know, I don't want to risk my family's life again. Is this something that you're getting a lot as SADC, particularly from those that have tested positive?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing that sort of is being confronted at the moment is kind of the stigma around it, and a lot of people are feeling kind of a lot of guilt when they test positive and feeling a lot of anxiety over, have I been in contact with family, who have I interacted with? I think there's so much that feels outside of everyone's control at the moment, and I think we all are doing our best to do what we can, but you know, there's so much that's still unknown, so much that's still outside of our control. I think that lack of control creates a lot of anxiety for people.
And Chris, there's also been concerns around some of those that have had to isolate alone, that, you know, did not have, you know, the benefit of being with family around them during that time. What goes through their minds? What are some of those stories that they're sharing as they call you, you know, as SADC, to try and find some coping mechanisms?
So I think that people naturally are very scared. I think the trajectory of this virus, what we've seen of this virus is most people don't really know how they're going to react. Are they going to be okay? And I think there's a lot of fear and anxiety around that. So, of course, when you're feeling that way, the first people you want to go to is your family. You want to be with your friends, your family, your loved ones, and the nature of this virus is obviously such that you can't do that. So, yeah, people have struggled a lot with the social isolation. I think it's something that even people who haven't tested positive can relate to in terms of how they've been experiencing this, where there's this total isolation from everyone. And I think as the months have dragged on, everyone's felt that more and more. And it's sort of, you're in an anxious situation, and our normal coping mechanisms of reaching out to friends or family aren't available to us, and everyone's trying to figure out, okay, how do I manage this now? How do I manage these big feelings that I'm sitting with?
And Chris, talk to us then about our responsibility. Let's say I have a family member that then tests positive. What then becomes my responsibility to try and ensure that I'm keeping them safe mentally?
So, you know, I think that the biggest trap or mistake that people fall into is often wanting to fix people's feelings. And I always say to people, take that pressure off of yourself. You can't control what someone feels. You can't fix their feelings. So really, it's just to provide a space to offer support, to allow them to speak about what they're feeling and just try and connect with and understand what they're feeling. That's really the most important thing.
And what are you also hearing as your organization around anxieties when it comes to a person that has tested positive re-entering either the workplace or now getting back into society?
So I think, yeah, in terms of a lot of this, like I said, is either poorly understood or not very well understood. And I think a lot of people feel like they're going to be sort of greeted with a bit of stigma, or people looking at them differently, or people wanting to avoid them. And I think we all need to just remember that this is all outside of our control. We can do the best that we can, but ultimately it's not something you should feel guilty about. And I think re-entering society is a natural part of the progression of this pandemic. Everyone who does test positive is going to have to stay at home, isolate, recover. But once you've done all the things that you need to do, it's important to think to yourself, okay, I'm going to get back to my normal life now, and I'm going to continue to take the same precautions I took before I tested positive. And hopefully your environment and the people in your environment are understanding of that as well.
And when it comes to the lockdown, I know that it has been eased somewhat. We're now at level 3. And I know that at the beginning of lockdown, your organization released a statement to say that people were battling to cope, you know, with the lockdown and were finding themselves a lot more anxious. Are you still getting that sense even now?
I think, you know, I always say that when we started this lockdown, there was a lot of anxiety, but there's also a lot of positivity where I felt like people were sort of like, okay, we're going to flatten the curve, we're going to get through this. And I think many people didn't anticipate how long we would be in this situation for. So I think that it's sort of gotten worse over time in terms of people's anxiety, in terms of people struggling or sitting with just depression or just feeling really, really down because the distance from families, the lack of contact, the lack of normal day-to-day life really is starting to sink in now that we're months in. It's starting to take more and more of a toll. So I think people are struggling with what they expected this to be and how long it's actually taken, and the fact that we're still going through it and still in South Africa, only reaching our peak now.
And what would your advice be then to someone that is finding themselves in isolation right now and not knowing what to do in terms of keeping busy? Do they focus on other things? What thoughts should they be thinking? What conversations should they be having with themselves?
Right, so I always say I think the best thing to do is if you are feeling anxious, it's most likely that you're feeling quite out of control, which is very common in this current environment because so much is not normal and not within our normal expected realm. So I think the best thing to do is try to recreate as much of your normal structure as you can. Even though maybe you're not at work or maybe you're working from home, so even though you can get out of bed whenever you want or shower at a strange time of day and all those freedoms, some people love that, but for many people that lack of routine hurts them. So I would say try and wake up at a reasonable time, shower, create as much of your normal day-to-day structure that you were used to before at home in order to give yourself that sense of every day being predictable and falling back into a predictable routine, which will give you that sense of control. Other than that, if you are feeling anxious, I always encourage people, allow yourself to feel that. You can't control your feelings, you can only control your actions. So give yourself time to breathe, give yourself time to process what you're feeling, process why you're feeling anxious, and just allow yourself to feel that way. It's okay and it's normal. Don't berate yourself or criticize yourself or tell yourself that you have to pull it together. It's okay. It's okay to take some time for yourself, and it's okay to feel what you're feeling. So, yeah, just try and give yourself the space for that as well.